They called him cold, detached, unemotional, stoic. They thought they knew why. But what they never saw were the times he tried to explain, and no one really listened. He's not stoic. He's just done wasting breath, done begging for empathy in rooms where silence feels safer than truth. This isn't toughness. This is the fatigue of a man who's carried too much, for too long, without being heard. It didn't start in adulthood. It started early. Boys don't cry. Men up. Oh, don't be weak. Fix it yourself. Those words weren't just advice. There were rules. Rules that shaped how he handled every scrape, every loss, every quiet ache that came with growing up. So he learned to hold it in, to swallow it down before anyone could see, to channel pain into action, into working harder, running faster, fixing what was broken. He turned every hurt into a job, every disappointment into another reason to push himself further. If something needed to be built, carried, or repaired, he stepped up. Not because it fixed the feeling, but because it hid it. When he scraped his knee, he was told to shake it off. When a friend moved away, the response was, "You'll make new ones." When his feelings got hurt, he heard, "Don't let it get to you." Comfort never came in the form of listening. It came as instruction, as a reminder to be tougher. And every time he showed pain, the room got uncomfortable. People looked away, changed the subject, made a joke, or gave him a pat on the shoulder with that familiar phrase, "Stay strong." He began to notice that his sadness made others uneasy, and so he decided it was easier to keep it to himself. By the time he was a teenager, he had mastered the art of composure. He knew how to laugh when he wanted to cry, how to say, "It's fine," when it wasn't, how to bury feelings so deep that even he couldn't always find them. Anger was allowed, it looked strong. But sadness, fear, vulnerability, those were signs of weakness. And weakness, he had been taught, was unacceptable. So he carried on, fixing problems no one else wanted to deal with, being the one people relied on, showing up when called, even when his own life felt heavy. And with each year, the message carved itself deeper. Your value is in what you can do, not in what you feel. By his 20s, he could handle bills, deadlines, emergencies, anything life threw at him. But there was one thing he still couldn't handle, saying out loud, "I need help." The few times he tried, the answers were quick and dismissive. "You'll get through it. You're strong. Others have it worse." None of it made him feel understood. It only confirmed what he already believed: opening up wasn't worth the risk. And so he learned a final lesson. If I hurt in silence, at least I won't be judged. Silence became his shield, his safety, his way of making sure no one could use his pain against him. He didn't become cold, he became careful. Careful with his words, careful with his heart, careful with who he let in. From the outside, he looked steady, even unshakable. Inside, he was simply a man who had been taught, from boyhood, that the safest place for his feelings was where no one else could see them. He wasn't always this quiet. There was a time when he believed people would understand if he just found the right words. A time when he thought speaking his truth might bring him closer to the people he cared about. So he tried. Not often, and never dramatically, but enough to test the waters. He told his wife, "I'm tired lately. I feel like I'm running on empty." He told a close friend, "I feel like I'm losing myself." He even let it slip to a coworker over lunch. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." Each time, he hoped for a pause, a moment of real listening, maybe a question, an open door to say more. But instead, what he got was noise, quick advice, a joke to break the tension, a shift in the conversation to safer, lighter topics, or a story about someone else's struggle, as if comparing pain could cancel it out. Sometimes, they heard him, but only as a problem to fix. "You just need more sleep." "You should work out more. You're overthinking it." And sometimes, they didn't hear him at all. They only caught the surface, the part that sounded like complaining, weakness, or an inconvenience. Worse were the moments when his honesty came back to haunt him. An argument months later where his own words were thrown back in his face. "Remember when you said you didn't know what you were doing? Maybe that's the problem." "Oh." Or a sarcastic jab in front of others. Careful, he's feeling lost again. It didn't take long to realize that for some people, vulnerability wasn't a bridge, it was ammunition. They didn't store his words in trust. They stored them in their back pocket for when they wanted to win. So he started talking less. Not because he ran out of things to say, but because he ran out of safe places to say them. He noticed how much energy it took to explain himself to people who had already decided what they believed about him. He noticed how his attempts to open up often left him feeling more alone than before. One day, without fanfare or announcement, he made a silent vow. I'm done explaining pain to people who only understand problems. I'm done trying to make my feelings digestible for people who only know how to swallow solutions. He began to measure his words, to choose his listeners, to let his silence protect what his voice could not. It wasn't bitterness, it was self-preservation, a quiet understanding that not everyone earns the right to know what's going on in your heart. From the outside, it looked like he'd grown distant. From the inside, he knew he'd simply grown wise. And once you've learned that lesson, it's hard to unlearn. Because the truth is, a man can survive without being understood, but he cannot survive being misunderstood over and over again. People looked at him and said, "He's got it all together. He's strong. He doesn't need much." They admired his composure, respected his stillness, envied the way he seemed untouched by chaos. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that silence isn't always peace. Sometimes, it's protection. He wasn't truly stoic. He was guarded, not because he had nothing to feel, but because he had learned the cost of showing it. He wasn't emotionless. He was simply unwilling to be misread again. He had opened his heart before, only to watch people twist his words, use his honesty against him, or minimize his pain until it felt like it didn't matter. The world called it strength, but he knew better. It was fatigue, not the kind you fix with a nap, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. After years of carrying what no one else sees, people assume stoicism is a sign of confidence, a mark of wisdom, even a badge of honor. And sometimes, it is. But for him, it wasn't about being above it all. It was about surviving it all. When you've been misunderstood enough times, you learn to keep the deepest parts of yourself out of reach. When you've been told your feelings are too much or unnecessary, you start locking them away not because they've gone away, but because you've learned the world doesn't handle them with care. So he smiled in photographs. He nodded in conversations. He kept his tone even, his answers short, his personal life behind a closed door. From the outside, it looked like control. From the inside, it was exhaustion. Because real strength, he knew, wasn't in pretending nothing could touch you. It was in carrying the weight quietly, without asking anyone else to share it. It was in resisting the urge to prove yourself to people who had already made up their minds. Yes, they called him stoic, but the truth was, he had simply grown tired of explaining a storm to people who only stood outside on sunny days. He didn't need them to understand anymore. He needed them to keep their distance. And maybe that's the biggest lie about stoicism, that it means you're unaffected. In reality, it often means you felt too much, for too long, and now you're choosing where and with whom you'll spend the little energy you have left. Unspoken pain doesn't disappear. It doesn't dissolve just because no one talks about it. It hides, in his shoulders, always slightly tense, as if bracing for a blow that never comes. In his clenched jaw, the teeth grinding through moments he doesn't even notice. In his distant eyes, focused somewhere beyond the room, beyond the present moment. It shows up in long drives, with no destination. The kind where the hum of the engine drowns out the thoughts he doesn't want to face. It shows up in half-hearted laughs, the ones that sound right, but feel empty inside. It shows up in sleeping too long, hoping to escape for just a few more hours, or not sleeping at all, because the quiet is too loud when the world goes dark. It's there in the way he avoids mirrors, not because he hates his reflection, but because he doesn't always recognize the man staring back. It's in the way he avoids talking about himself, steering conversations towards safer ground, where no one will ask the questions he isn't ready to answer. Because explaining his pain takes energy he's already using to hold himself together. He spends his days balancing responsibilities, meeting expectations, showing up for everyone else, all while keeping the cracks from showing. By the time someone says, "You can talk to me," he has nothing left to give. So he bottles it, boxes it, pushes through, tells himself, tomorrow will be better, even when he doesn't believe it. He gets up, gets dressed, goes to work, pays the bills, all the while carrying a weight no one else can see. Make no mistake, he feels everything, every disappointment, every loss, every moment when he wishes someone had stayed, or listened, or simply said, "I get it." But unspoken pain doesn't ask for permission to exist. It finds ways to live in the body, in the stiffness of his back, in the headaches that come without warning, in the way his chest feels heavy even on a sunny day. And yet, he carries it quietly, not because he's proud of the weight, but because he's tired of having to prove it's real, tired of having to justify why it still hurts, tired of hearing how quickly someone else would get over it. So he lets it live where no one can see it. Because if the world won't hold it with care, he'll hold it himself, even if it means carrying it alone. He's not bitter, he's just honest. He's not afraid of vulnerability. He's afraid of wasting it, because he's learned that vulnerability is not free. It costs energy, trust, and a piece of yourself you don't get back if it's mishandled. And when he opened up before, people said the right things, but nothing changed. They offered sympathy in words, but not in presence. They gave advice, but not their time. They offered platitudes instead of real support. "It'll get better. You're strong. You'll be fine. At least it's not worse." They meant well, maybe. But the truth is, empty comfort leaves you lonelier than silence ever could. So now, he keeps it to himself. Not because he doesn't care about connection, but because he values his peace more than someone else's approval. He has learned that telling the wrong person your truth is like handing them a fragile glass. They might hold it carefully for a moment, but eventually they set it down without noticing the cracks. These days, he chooses different outlets. He writes it down pages filled with thoughts he never intends to share, but that still lighten the weight when he sees them on paper. He lifts it out through the strain of weights, turning emotional heaviness into physical strength. He walks it off at dawn, when the streets are quiet and the air feels clean, letting the movement untangle the knots inside him. He breathes through it on long, quiet nights, slowing his pulse until his body remembers that it's safe, even if his mind still doubts it. It's not that he doesn't want to be known. It's that he finally respects his own peace more than the need to be understood. There's a freedom in no longer explaining yourself to people who have already decided what you are. There's a safety in keeping the most sacred parts of you away from careless hands. He understands now that not every listener is a safe place. Some are just curious. Some are collecting details to use later. Some only want enough of your story to feel like they know you, without doing the work to actually be there for you. So he lets the silence do the protecting. He speaks when it matters, to the few who have earned the right to hear him. And with everyone else, he keeps the conversation light, not to hide who he is, but to guard the parts of him that are still healing. Because at this stage of his life, peace is no longer a luxury, it's a priority, and he knows that every time he spends it on the wrong person, it takes twice as long to get it back. Silence used to feel like a punishment. Now, it feels like a teacher. In the quiet, he has learned that boundaries are not about shutting people out, they're about keeping the wrong energy from getting in. He has learned that the absence of noise makes room for things he never noticed before. The way the morning light falls across the table, the sound of his own breathing, the subtle shift in his chest when stress leaves his body. In the silence, he has learned to listen to himself, to hear the difference between a passing mood and a deeper truth, to notice when he is tired not just physically, but emotionally, to catch himself before he says yes out of obligation and instead choose no out of self-respect. He's learned that solitude doesn't mean being unloved. It means having the space to love yourself without interruption. It means doing things because they matter to you, not because they'll impress someone else. It's cooking a meal you enjoy, even if no one else tastes it. It's taking a long drive with no destination, simply because the road feels good beneath the tires. It's choosing the long walk home because you like the quiet, not because you're avoiding anyone. In the stillness, he's discovered that not every problem requires an audience. Some wounds heal faster when they're not exposed to the wrong kind of light. Some victories feel sweeter when they're just for you. And some decisions are easier when they're not weighed down by other people's opinions. He's learned to spot the people who are safe to let in the ones who listen without rushing to fix him, who remember the small details, who notice the change in his tone before he says anything. And he's learned to stop chasing those who never noticed him in the first place. He has discovered that the world will keep demanding more, but he gets to decide how much he gives. That energy is a currency, and if you spend it recklessly, you will find yourself bankrupt in all the ways that matter. The silence has taught him that it's okay to walk away from people who drain him, from situations that shrink him, from roles that no longer fit. And it's okay to walk toward the things that light him up, even if no one else understands why. Most of all, the quiet has taught him this. You can lose a lot: relationships, opportunities, years of your life, and still come out whole. If you stop giving pieces of yourself to people who can't hold them with care, silence isn't emptiness anymore. It's clarity. It's the sound of his own life, lived on his terms. From the outside, it still looks like stoicism. The calm expression, the measured tone, the way he listens more than he speaks. But what people mistake for detachment is something else entirely. It's growth. He's not stoic, he's evolved. He's moved past the need to defend every feeling, to justify every choice, to explain every scar. He has stopped playing the exhausting game of trying to make others see him the way he sees himself. He no longer feels the urge to prove he's strong, because strength is no longer about lifting the heaviest weight or carrying the largest burden alone. It's about knowing which weights aren't his to carry. It's about putting down what's been breaking his back for years, even if others don't understand why. He has learned that being calm isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about managing them so they don't manage him. He still feels anger, sadness, and fear, but now they pass through him, instead of living inside him rent-free. He's evolved past the hunger for constant validation. He doesn't need applause to confirm his worth. He doesn't need agreement to feel secure in his decisions. He doesn't need someone to tell him he's doing the right thing, because he trusts himself enough to know when he is. He still cares for people, but he no longer sacrifices his peace to win their approval. He will show up when he can, help when he chooses, listen when it matters, but not at the expense of his own well-being. The guilt that used to keep him overcommitted is gone, replaced by a steady sense of self-respect. And here's the thing, evolution doesn't make him unreachable, it makes him intentional. If you have his time, it's because he wants you to have it. If you have his trust, it's because you've earned it. If you know his story, it's because you've proven you can hold it with care. The world might still call it stoicism, but he knows the truth. This is freedom. Freedom from the old scripts that told him to suffer quietly. Freedom from the belief that love means losing yourself. Freedom from the cycle of over-explaining and under-living. He's not cold. He's just warm in the right places. He's not closed off. He's just selective about who he lets in. He's not silent because he has nothing to say. He's silent because he no longer wastes words on the wrong audience. Evolution has given him clarity that life is too short to keep explaining your pain to people who only understand convenience. That peace is worth protecting at all costs. That it's possible to care deeply for others without abandoning yourself. And so, he lives differently now. Not as the boy who was told not to cry. Not as the man who kept trying to be understood. But as someone who has finally learned he doesn't have to explain his pain to be whole. To the man who stopped explaining his pain, you're not cold. You're not broken. You're not distant. You're just clear now about what deserves your voice. You've carried more than most, and survived more than you ever spoke aloud. You've learned that the deepest strength is the kind that doesn't seek to be seen. You don't owe the world your wounds. You only owe yourself healing. So let them call you stoic. Let them assume you feel nothing. You know the truth. You feel everything. You just no longer feel the need to explain it.